Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're really embarking on something special. Our mission is to explore a deeply personal and honestly incredibly insightful account of what it's truly like to navigate life with neurodiversity,
hmm
specifically ADHD and ASD.
hmm
And this isn't just, a clinical breakdown. We're diving right into a first-person narrative. It's unfiltered, it's raw. It gives us this direct window into the daily experiences, the professional life of someone living this reality day in, day out.
Yeah.
We've got this really unique set of sources for this deep dive, all centered on this individual's reflections. And I have to say, it offers some genuinely thought-provoking insights.
And what's truly compelling, I think, is exactly that intimate personal lens. Like you said, it's not a textbook definition, not some diagnostic checklist. It's the visceral lived experience brought to life.
Exactly.
And by bringing the reality of ADHD and ASD right to the forefront through this person's story, we gain this level of understanding, maybe empathy too, that just goes far beyond abstract ideas. It lets us bridge that gap,
Yeah.
between the theory and the actual human experience.
Hmm.
It offers these invaluable perspectives, whether we're thinking about personal growth, social stuff, or, like we'll get into today, the really complex world of the workplace.
Yeah.
It really pushes us, I think, to move beyond just labels and get into genuine comprehension.
Absolutely. And let's dive right into that immediate reality because our author kicks us off with something quite striking, almost poignant, really. This thought that unexpected events, well, when they're actually happening, they're honestly not funny.
Hmm.
They only sometimes become humorous way later in retrospect. And even then, it's only for those people who can actually find the humor in them.
Right. If you just want to forget it, it's never funny.
Exactly. So this kind of sets the stage for a core characteristic they identify for their ADHD, this tendency to shoot first, ask questions later. They
hmm
put it really powerfully, saying that when there's a command structure like ready, aim, fire, the brain tends to just jump straight to
We'll
five.
just fire, yeah.
Yeah, it's this spontaneous leap into action.
And this shoot first trait, as the author describes it so vividly, almost certainly leads to stepping on metaphorical landmines.
Almost certainly. Wow.
Think about that. It's not like, oh, an occasional slip up. It's framed as this inherent predisposition, right, linked to specific neurological differences.
Hmm.
For some people, particularly with certain neurotypes, the brain's reward system might be really heavily geared towards that immediate action,
Okay.
sometimes overriding the inhibitory controls or the slower, more step-by-step processing that others might use. And while this fire first thing often clashes, sometimes severely, with those linear expectations we see in, well, lots of social and professional
Right,
settings.
the step-by-step way.
Exactly. Leading to those frustrating labels like you hear reckless or impulsive,
Hmm.
instead of maybe seeing it as action-oriented or proactive.
Mm-hmm.
But, and this is crucial, we have to acknowledge that in other contexts, this exact same trait can be an incredible asset.
Okay, that's a really interesting distinction. So when might this shoot first trait actually be a strength, not just seen as a weakness?
Well, think about fields where really rapid decision-making under pressure is key,
Mhm.
like crisis management, maybe emergency services,
Sure.
or even in highly dynamic creative fields like, say, rapid prototyping or improvisational performance.
Yeah.
In those situations, the ability to just bypass that analysis paralysis, to react instinctively, that could be a genuine superpower.
Right.
It enabled these lightning-fast insights, incredible spontaneity. The tragedy really often lies in that mismatch.
The mismatch.
Yeah, between the individual's kind of default operating system and environments that just rigidly demand that sequential, measured, ready, aim, fire approach.
Yeah.
And this initial misstep then frequently leads the author into what they call these high-tension situations, where they're constantly sort of navigating the fallout. From a bigger picture view, it really highlights how something seen as a challenge in one place can absolutely be a gift somewhere else. It
Yeah.
really underscores that environmental aspect of disability and ability, doesn't it?
It really does clarify it. It's not about a flaw in their intention, but this fundamental difference in how their brain processes things, which then just
Mm.
gets mislabeled. So, okay, what happens then when our author does prepare? Because they mention that preparation, where they suspect might be influenced more by their ASD,
Right, the ASD side.
is usually a solitary thing. They prepare meticulously, often alone, really poring over the details.
Uh-huh.
And the outcomes, they say, are striking, almost like comically so. Two things tend to happen. Either the events they've prepped for just get comically canceled, poof, gone. All that effort, for
Oh,
nothing.
no, this is true.
Or, and this is really wild, their preparation turns out to be wildly off base.
Off pace.
Yep.
How so?
Like, so far off, it could be material for a stand-up routine. They give specific examples. These off-base preps happening during really critical moments, like job interviews or just regular meetings.
Oh, no.
They vividly describe being in an interview, having answered similar questions loads of times before, but in that specific moment, just completely misunderstanding the question.
Oh.
And the kicker, they only realize their mistake mid-answer by catching the interviewer's facial expression.
Oof.
That moment where you suddenly see that look that, it happened again, a look of confusion or maybe mild exasperation on their face.
That raises a really, really intriguing question, doesn't it? The author's ability to accurately read a person's psychological state from their expression, that subtle shift in the interviewer's face, even when they've totally misinterpreted the intent of the spoken question.
Yeah.
They themselves say they're bewildered by it. Why can't they seem to get both channels, the verbal and the nonverbal, in sync? What this tells us is actually quite profound, I think, about the different ways neurodiverse individuals process information.
Yeah.
It highlights that significant strengths, like maybe an acute sensitivity to nonverbal cues or emotional states, can exist right alongside very specific challenges. Challenges like, accurately interpreting verbal intent or following multi-step instructions or integrating information sequentially.
So it's almost like their brain is maybe prioritizing different streams of data at the same time or processing them through different pathways leading to these kind of surprising disconnects.
Precisely. It's not a simple across-the-board deficit, but more like a distinct processing architecture. For instance, what we broadly call executive function, that whole set of cognitive skills for planning, self-control, working memory, starting tasks.
Right.
That can operate very differently. So while some aspects, like maybe the ability to hyper-focus intensely on a solitary task during prep, might be really strong, others, like accurately predicting how information will land or adjusting on the fly to a subtle shift in conversation, might be more challenging. And these varied strengths and challenges can often be really perplexing, even to the person experiencing them, let alone to others trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
It's this complex interplay, right? It illustrates that neurodiversity isn't just a binary thing, abled or disabled, but really a spectrum of unique cognitive styles, each with its own set of pros and cons, depending heavily on the environment.
And, as if the daily missteps and these preparation paradoxes weren't enough to navigate,
Right.
the author then shifts to what they describe as even more significant, unexpected events in their life. We're talking instances of pay cuts and even outright recommendations for dismissal.
Wow.
And it's in trying to understand these deeper, more systemic problems that they made a really pivotal discovery. After their diagnosis, they started reading a lot, especially books by mental health professionals from abroad who also had ADD characteristics. And they specifically mentioned Dr. Edward M. Hallowell's ADHD 2.0, New Science and Essential Strategies for Thriving with Distraction from Childhood Through Adulthood.
Ah, Hallowell. Yes, a very influential voice. And in that book, the author found this profound concept that just deeply resonated with their own experiences, the scapegoat phenomena.
Scapegoat.
Yeah. Dr. Hallowell's work, as it's translated in the source material, states something like, virtually anything that goes wrong in the family gets blamed on the ADHD child.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, the child is draped with a kind of blanket of derision and scorn that smothers his or her development of confidence and self-esteem. And what's truly insightful here is how our author powerfully identifies with this pattern. They strongly believe it extends way beyond just the family unit, right into the professional workplace.
Right.
This isn't just about individual mistakes. It points to these deep-seated societal and psychological mechanisms at play.
Can you maybe elaborate on those mechanisms? How does someone, particularly someone neurodivergent, end up becoming a scapegoat in a professional setting?
Certainly. It often seems to stem from a mix of things. One big factor is just a lack of understanding or awareness about neurodiversity. When colleagues or managers encounter different working styles, different communication patterns, they might unconsciously attribute them to, well, a lack of effort, maybe incompetence, or even sometimes ill intent, rather than seeing an underlying cognitive difference. This can lead to what psychologists call the fundamental attribution error.
Oh, this is...
It's where we tend to overestimate internal factors like someone's personality or supposed flaws and underestimate external ones, like the environmental mismatch or, in this case, neurodiversity. Another mechanism is cognitive bias. If a problem pops up in a team and there's someone who already kind of stands out as different or maybe difficult in some way,
Okay.
it's easier, almost like a mental shortcut, to just pin the blame on them. It creates a convenient target, right?
Yeah.
It lets others maybe avoid deeper self-reflection or looking at bigger systemic issues within the team or the organization.
So it's not always like a conscious, malicious thing, but could be more of an unconscious bias, or just the path of least resistance when problems arise.
Precisely. And the devastating impact that Dr. Hallowell describes, this persistent blanket of derision and scorn, it can silently, yet really profoundly undermine someone's career path, their sense of self-worth, their overall well-being.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine being constantly blamed, subtly, or maybe not so subtly, for issues that might have nothing to do with your performance, or are simply a consequence of your brain being wired differently.
It sounds exhausting.
It becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. Perceived problems get blamed on the individual, which further erodes their confidence, making it exponentially harder for them to succeed, no matter how capable they actually are.
Mm-hmm.
This cycle can lead to chronic stress, anxiety, this feeling of never being good enough, even for really highly capable people.
It's such an insidious cycle, isn't it? And probably far more pervasive than many of us realize. And what makes it even tougher, as the author points out, is that the specific workplace tasks they struggled with weren't these super complex analytical skills or highly specialized things you'd expect to be hard.
Right.
They were things most people consider common sense abilities, like the basic fabric of daily office life. They list them out: memorizing, dealing with deadlines, summarizing information, speaking concisely, requesting things, and avoiding procrastination.
Yeah, the fundamentals.
Exactly. So what does this actually mean for a typical workplace? One that's designed around the assumption that everyone just has these abilities, and for the person trying to navigate it, it sounds like a constant, exhausting uphill battle.
And that is precisely the core of the issue, isn't it? These difficulties, they don't stem from a lack of intelligence or unwillingness or even a lack of trying super hard. They come from fundamental differences in, well, executive function and how information gets processed. We could break a few of those down maybe.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay, so memorizing. This often links to working memory, right?
Yeah.
For someone with ADHD, trying to hold multiple pieces of information in your head, shuffle them around, pull them out on demand, it can be like juggling a dozen balls while riding a unicycle.
Huh. Yeah, good analogy.
It's not that they can't learn, but that on-the-spot recall and mental organization that so many tasks need can be a real struggle.
Okay. What about deadlines?
Deadlines. Classic manifestation of what's sometimes called time blindness. Time might not feel linear or have that same sense of urgency for everyone. A deadline that's an hour away might feel just as distant as one a month away until the very last second,
Oh, wow.
which leads to intense pressure, maybe missed targets, even with the best intentions.
Okay. And summarizing or speaking concisely.
That often ties into the ability to filter information. A neurodivergent brain might perceive all the incoming information as equally important, which makes it incredibly hard to pick out the key points from all the peripheral details. So you get these long, maybe winding explanations that can lose the listener. Not because the person is disorganized, but because their internal processor struggles to prioritize what's most important to say right then.
That makes sense. And requesting things?
Requesting can actually be quite complex. It involves multiple executive functions. Remembering to make the request, figuring out the right time and the right words, maybe overcoming social anxieties, managing the steps of the interaction. And for someone with ASD characteristics, navigating those unspoken social rules around making requests can be a huge hurdle in itself.
Right. And procrastination, which gets labeled as laziness so often.
Exactly. Procrastination is deeply tied to task initiation and the brain's motivation systems. It is not laziness. It's often an inability to just start tasks that aren't immediately stimulating or feel super urgent, even when the person genuinely desperately wants to do them. That initial energy barrier to just get going can be enormous.
So when a workplace just assumes everyone has these common sense abilities equally and can deploy them effortlessly, it basically sets up neurodivergent folks for failure, doesn't it?
That's exactly it. These environments inadvertently create massive barriers to success.
Mm-hmm.
And this leads to deep frustration, not just for the individual who feels like they're constantly failing or letting people down,
Yeah.
but also for their colleagues who might not understand why these seemingly simple tasks are so challenging. They might interpret it as incompetence or defiance or laziness, when it's none of those things.
Right.
And unfortunately, this lack of understanding then feeds directly back into that whole scapegoat pattern we were just talking about.
The cycle continues.
Yeah. The individual gets blamed for perceived shortcomings,
Mm-hmm.
rather than the environment being looked at or adapted to support different needs. It's this fundamental mismatch, right, between the person's cognitive profile and the demands of the environment, leading to this cascade of negative outcomes.
It paints such a clear and frankly sobering picture of the systemic challenges involved. And the author then gives us a series of really powerful personal workplace stories that just bring these challenges and that scapegoat pattern vividly to life. Let's start with the immediate aftermath of their diagnosis. They decided to be open, quickly disclosed their ADHD and ASD to their supervisor.
Okay, took courage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what happened next? Swift contract termination during their probation period.
Oh, no.
It's just such a harsh reality check, isn't it, on the potential consequences of being transparent when there isn't enough understanding or actual support within the organization.
That anecdote is, well, it's heartbreaking in its directness. It's brutal honesty.
Yeah.
The willingness to be open, to share something so personal, hoping for understanding, maybe some accommodation.
Right.
And then to be met with such an immediate, severe professional setback. It just starkly underscores the lack of structural understanding and support in so many workplaces.
Yeah.
It highlights how vulnerability can actually be penalized when the environment just isn't equipped to process or respond constructively to neurodiversity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily just about that one supervisor's reaction either, right? It points to a broader organizational failure. Failure to educate staff, create inclusive policies, provide the necessary support structures.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing that disclosure as an opportunity, maybe a chance to understand and make some minor adjustments for a potentially valuable employee, it was met with this punitive response,
Yeah.
which just reinforces the shame and fear that so many neurodivergent people feel about disclosing their condition in the first place.
Yeah.
You can see how that experience would lead to profound distrust in future workplaces.
Absolutely. And then there's the second anecdote from a prior job, which really shows that baffling disconnects between tangible results and, well, negative evaluations. The author achieved 160% of their budget performance. I mean, that's incredible success by any measure, right?
Phenomenal, yeah.
Only to be told during their performance review that their monthly salary was being cut by the equivalent of 1 month's rent.
What? Why?
They asked for a reason, but the supervisor apparently just seemed to be relaying orders from higher-ups with no clear explanation given.
Unbelievable.
Understandably, this led to the author resigning. It's almost surreal to achieve way beyond your target and then get a significant pay cut with zero justification.
This story perfectly illustrates just how insidious that scapegoat phenomenon can be in the workplace. It's deeply unsettling because here you have objective, measurable success, 160% of budget. That's not just meeting goals, it's smashing them.
Right.
Yet, this tangible, data-driven achievement is completely ignored, overshadowed by maybe unseen, perhaps subconscious biases, or maybe just an organizational need to cut costs by targeting someone perceived as different.
When a company or even just a department is under pressure, or maybe it just lacks the tools to understand diverse working styles, someone who operates differently, even if they're objectively a high performer, can become a convenient target.
So you're saying it likely had nothing to do with their actual performance at all? It was about something else entirely? Precisely. The fact that the supervisor couldn't even provide a coherent reason, that speaks volumes.
Yeah.
It strongly suggests it was a top-down directive, likely with no basis in the author's actual work output. And this isn't just unfair, it's psychologically crushing.
Yeah.
Imagine pouring all your effort into exceeding expectations, only to be financially penalized and given no rational reason why. It fundamentally destroys trust, self-worth, any sense of fairness. It also reinforces that awful feeling that your contributions don't matter or are somehow unwanted, regardless of the hard data, which, understandably, leads to demoralization and, as we saw, resignation. It's such a powerful example of how subjective perceptions and organizational biases can just completely override objective performance metrics, causing real psychological and financial harm. It shows how those unmet common sense expectations can overshadow even truly exceptional contributions, making the individual vulnerable to being scapegoated.
And then we arrive at the foreign company saga, which is almost like a mini drama series in itself, unfolding over quite a stretch of time. The author was initially really excited to join this foreign company, especially because they were hired by a CEO from New Zealand who they described as seeming humanly well-made.
Humanly well-made. That's evocative.
Yeah, like someone genuinely compassionate, competent. Everything seemed incredibly promising, a potential fresh start.
Indeed. You can feel that initial optimism, right? Suggesting this hopeful new chapter may be a place where the author could finally find that sense of belonging and recognition they deserved. That perception of the CEO implies trust, positive expectations, a belief this leader would foster a supportive, fair environment, which makes what happens next even more poignant and, well, frankly, quite shocking. That hope for a better fit is something so many neurodivergent individuals are constantly searching for.
But then comes the immediate twist. The CEO reveals he's actually leaving the company just 2 months after the author was hired.
Wow. 2 months.
Yeah. Pretty quick turnaround. It sets this strange, unsettling tone right from the beginning. Talk about an unexpected event hitting you right out of the gate.
That creates an immediate sense of just profound instability, doesn't it? And raises serious questions about the long-term plan for the role, the company's commitment.
Absolutely.
For anyone starting a new job, finding out your direct boss, the person who hired you, is immediately on their way out.
Yeah.
That's disorienting. But for someone who might already struggle with unexpected changes or need clear structure because of their neurodivergence, this sudden news would undoubtedly amplify anxiety and uncertainty right from day one.
Yeah.
It's like trying to build your house on shifting sand from the get-go. It just immediately undermines any sense of security the author might have started to feel.
And here's where it gets truly fascinating, almost like a twist of fate. The author then observes that this CEO himself showed traits strikingly similar to the author's own ADHD and ASD characteristics.
Interesting.
Yeah, they describe him having difficulty focusing on the meeting agenda, being impulsive with company spending, even seeming profoundly distracted during client meetings. They even mention clients calling up after meetings with the CEO to ask the author, basically, why did he even come?
Oh my goodness.
This dynamic adds such a complex, fascinating layer to that whole scapegoat idea we discussed earlier.
This is a crucial detail. It adds another really profound layer to the whole story, almost like a mirror moment for the author, perhaps. What's so intriguing here is the potential for undiagnosed or unrecognized neurodivergence in a position of power.
Right.
This CEO's behaviors, difficulty focusing, impulsivity, seeming distracted. They mirror the very challenges the author faces, the things we've identified as common for individuals with ADHD, ASD. This creates an incredibly ironic and obviously very challenging dynamic. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often does friction in workplaces happen not just because of personality clashes, but because of unacknowledged neurocognitive differences, even at the highest levels?
So it's possible the CEO was wrestling with similar internal processes himself, and maybe that created this unique, perhaps even subconscious friction between them.
Exactly. If the CEO was struggling internally in similar ways, it could potentially explain this profound breakdown in communication and mutual understanding. You might have had two individuals operating from a somewhat similar neurocognitive framework,
Yeah.
but without any explicit understanding or strategies for how to interact effectively. It just led to friction instead of collaboration.
Wow.
It's a powerful illustration that those common sense expectations, they apply across the board, even to people at the top. And when they're unmet, they can create significant problems regardless of position. Sometimes it might even lead to unfair or displaced blame onto others. It's a very human, though unfortunate dynamic someone struggling internally might inadvertently project or displace their own difficulties onto someone who perhaps mirrors those struggles back at them,
Oh.
even if that person is performing well in other ways. The CEO likely didn't understand the author's unique operating system because maybe he barely understood his own, leading to this deep, unspoken misalignment.
Exactly. And this dynamic played out over a really brutal 2-year period, during which the CEO continuously pressured the author to resign.
2 years of pressure.
Yeah, this wasn't a one-off incident. It was sustained pressure, indicating this profound, prolonged breakdown in communication and mutual understanding, just as the author states.
That speaks volumes about the immense psychological toll an environment like that can take. Being subjected to that kind of sustained, relentless pressure to quit, especially when you're trying your best to perform, maybe already struggling with tasks inherently difficult for your neurotype. It's incredibly draining. It points to this deep, festering misunderstanding that just grew over time, where neither party seemed able to bridge that gap in their communication or working styles. It just worsened the conflict, creating a truly toxic, almost abusive environment for the author. It really highlights how a lack of understanding can devolve into something like active psychological warfare in a workplace, just slowly chipping away at an individual's sense of value and belonging.
Yeah.
That prolonged pressure itself could absolutely be seen as a form of the scapegoat dynamic, where the author was basically being pushed out without clear performance-based reasons.
Eventually, the author, probably exhausted by it all, accepted a position change, maybe hoping for some kind of resolution or at least a break from the pressure.
Understandable.
But, and this is key, they weren't informed about a significant pay cut associated with that change until the official order actually came down.
Seriously?
Yeah, a move the author recognized as being potentially illegal. This just adds this layer of blatant unfairness, possibly exploitative behavior, to an already incredibly difficult situation.
Okay, that particular detail is critical because it shifts things beyond just misunderstanding into potentially exploitative, maybe even unjust territory.
Yeah.
Withholding crucial information, like a substantial pay cut, until it's basically a done deal, especially if it violates legal norms. That signifies a complete disregard for the author's well-being and rights.
Right.
It's an example of how that scapegoat dynamic can escalate, right? From subtle blame to overt professional harm, even financial manipulation. It highlights a power imbalance being used detrimentally against the neurodivergent individual, who might already feel vulnerable or less equipped to navigate those kinds of corporate maneuvers. It just reinforces that pattern of adverse, worst-case scenarios that the author noted kept happening to them, suggesting that even when they tried to compromise, they were still subjected to unfair practices.
But despite all this overwhelming adversity, the author made a really pragmatic and, frankly, incredibly resilient decision. They prioritized their family. They actually managed to find a new job within 3 months, specifically to mitigate that impending pay cut, which demonstrates amazing foresight, adaptability, and just this undeniable will to survive and keep going.
It absolutely highlights the author's inherent resourcefulness, doesn't it? And that profound dedication to their family, even facing such a significant escalating adversity. It shows this proactive approach, taking action to lessen the negative impacts of an unjust situation, rather than just succumbing to despair or helplessness.
Yeah.
That ability to adapt, to prioritize, to pivot so quickly, despite the emotional and professional turmoil they've just been through. It's a powerful testament to their underlying strength and resilience, even while navigating these huge challenges. It really underscores that difficulties with executive function or social communication absolutely do not equate to a lack of agency or determination.
And then we get to the truly shocking, almost cinematic ending to this foreign company saga. The author announces their departure, having found this new job. And the very next day, the CEO also resigns.
The day after.
The very next day. And the author explicitly points out, a CEO-level resignation isn't decided overnight. It would have been planned well in advance.
Absolutely weeks, if not months.
Right. Which strongly implies the CEO's own departure was long planned, and that demotion and pay cut inflicted on the author might have been entirely unnecessary, or even possibly maliciously timed, given the CEO knew he was already heading out the door.
What's truly astonishing here is the consistency of these worst-case scenarios happening to the author. Throughout their life, across different jobs, different environments, even internationally in the U.S., despite their efforts and achievements.
Yeah.
This final twist in the saga, with the CEO's resignation literally the day after the author's, it profoundly underscores that idea that the author was indeed caught in this deeply entrenched scapegoat dynamic. I mean, the CEO, knowing his own departure was imminent, had absolutely no strategic or business-related reason to implement such a harsh, potentially illegal pay cut and demotion on the author just weeks before leaving himself.
So it really feels like it was either personal or at least deeply misguided and unnecessary.
It strongly suggests the CEO's actions were either, maybe, a final act of unconscious displacement, perhaps projecting his own unaddressed struggles onto someone who reflected them, or potentially a calculated, entirely unnecessary infliction of hardship just before he left. It points to this cyclical nature of misunderstanding, bias, and its devastating impact on career stability and psychological well-being, where the author consistently finds themselves in situations bearing the brunt of organizational or interpersonal dysfunction, regardless of their own performance or the real underlying issues. It really makes you wonder about the broader societal implications of these dynamics, where individuals with neurodivergent traits, diagnosed or not, might unknowingly contribute to or worsen difficult situations for each other, just perpetuating cycles of misunderstanding. It's a stark reminder that even those in positions of power aren't immune to their own biases or unaddressed challenges, and these can have severe consequences for the people working under them.
So, after experiencing so many of these worst case scenarios, these deeply unfair, confusing, frankly painful situations,
Mm,
the author comes to this truly crucial realization. They realize it's futile to blame an incurable individuality. You just can't blame something that's fundamentally part of who you are.
that's powerful.
It is a powerful acceptance. Okay, let's unpack this a bit. This realization led to a genuinely transformative decision. The decision to embrace their neurodivergence not as a burden, not as this deficit to be constantly fought against or fixed, but as a buddy, a lifelong companion they'll journey with.
And this raises such an immensely important question, doesn't it? Not just for individuals navigating their own neurodiversity, but for society as a whole.
Mm.
How can this profound shift in perspective, moving from fighting a condition to accepting it, embracing it as a lifelong companion, how can that reshape our entire approach
Mm.
to support, to self-care, to advocacy?
Yeah.
This isn't just, a personal coping strategy. It's a fundamental paradigm shift in how someone relates to their own mind. By reframing their neurodivergence as a buddy, the author is signaling this move away from self-criticism towards self-compassion, recognizing simply, this is how my brain operates.
Hmm.
And that acceptance, it opens up whole new avenues, right? For developing strategies that actually work with their brain, not against it.
Mm.
For fostering self-advocacy.
Mm.
For building environments that truly accommodate their unique needs.
And it completely transforms the struggle into something incredibly meaningful, too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. What's so profoundly inspiring here is seeing how that personal struggle can be transmuted, changed into this powerful outward-looking mission. The author's commitment, explicitly saying they'll dedicate the remaining 50 years of their life to helping others who experience similar stresses and challenges. That's
Wow.
incredibly powerful.
It really is.
It moves beyond just individual coping to collective contribution, a dedication to easing the very suffering they themselves have endured. And it emphasizes that understanding and acceptance, they aren't just personal victories. They're essential foundations for brighter societal change, for building a future where embracing one's neurodivergence as a buddy isn't some rare exception, but a recognized, supported, maybe even celebrated way of being.
Yeah.
It's about taking that hard-won wisdom from personal adversity and turning it into this beacon of hope and practical support for other people.
Wow. This deep dive has truly given us such a unique, firsthand lens on neurodiversity. We've seen the distinctive ways ADHD can manifest in unexpected situations, those shoot-first moments that are challenging but maybe also powerful in the right context. We've explored that paradox of meticulous but sometimes wildly off-base preparation and the cognitive architecture behind it. We dove into that insidious scapegoat phenomenon, seeing how it stretches from family into the workplace and the devastating toll it takes.
Okay.
We looked at those often overlooked difficulties with common sense tasks, the everyday hurdles that become huge barriers for neurodivergent folks, despite intelligence or effort. And finally, we witnessed that incredible power of acceptance, that profound act of redefining one's unique wiring not as a flaw, but as a lifelong buddy, transforming personal struggle into this mission of advocacy and support.
And zooming out just a bit from this incredibly rich personal journey, it really compels us, doesn't it, to reconsider not just how we individually support neurodivergent people, but how we fundamentally design our institutions, our workplaces, our education systems, our broader societal expectations. It challenges the very idea of normal and really highlights the immense, valuable diversity of human cognition that's all around us.
Yeah.
So here's maybe a provocative thought for you, for everyone listening, to mull over. What if, instead of primarily viewing neurodiversity through this lens of deficits that need to be managed or fixed, what if we actively sought to understand and then strategically leverage the unique strengths and perspectives it brings? How might a society that's truly designed for all minds that maybe shoot first with bursts of innovation, or prepare meticulously with incredible attention to detail, or process information in nuanced, unexpected ways, how might that society unlock potentials we haven't even imagined? How could it foster entirely new forms of innovation, new ways of solving problems, new kinds of human connection?
That's a big question.
It is. And what responsibility do we all share in building environments where having a buddy relationship with your own brain, whatever its specific wiring, isn't just a hard-won personal victory, but becomes a widely accepted, even celebrated societal norm? An environment where everyone's unique operating system is seen not as a liability, but as a potential asset.